Hi there, my name is Peter Janis, president here at Radial Engineering, and I'm going to talk to you guys about the Radial Pro D2. The Pro D2 is a keyboard DI box. What does that mean? It basically means it's any old, like pretty much any old DI box, except for it's been optimized for keyboards. Keyboards are particularly problematic. There are some issues with keyboards that make them more suitable to being used with what we call a passive DI box versus an active DI box. It really has to do with signal handling primarily, then it has to do with noise issues. So let's kind of look at what goes on. How a DI box works is pretty simple. What happens is that you have your keyboard, it is plugged into a mixing console. In between these two devices, what you want to have is a DI box, and that DI box basically converts the signal from high impedance to low impedance, so from that 1/4 inch guitar jack out to an XLR balanced connector. By doing that, it allows me to run 100 meters, 300 feet, no problem. XLR balanced connectors or balanced lines have been used for the by the telephone companies for hundreds of years. I mean, these things will run 1,000 miles or 3,000 kilometers, no problem. So you can imagine, you can get much longer distance. So the DI box's primary function is to allow going long distances without picking up noise. Now, that being said, you have to understand some of the problems within the DI box. So to really understand that, you have to think in terms of signal levels. DI boxes today have to handle a lot more signal than they used to. If you go back, call it, I don't know, 20 years ago, the Fender Rhodes piano was the norm. That was a very low output device that was about as loud as a guitar. Today, you have these digital pianos and samplers and drum machines and all these kinds of digitally sourced material that are unbelievably loud. Take a digital piano, play loud, turn it up, play loud, it'll distort just about anything. And why that is because the output of that piano will typically overload the input of a mixer or something like that. Keyboards typically put out about minus 20 dB versus a microphone or a DI box at minus 50 dB. So in other words, you've got a lot more output than a keyboard. And keyboards, when turned up, can be as high as 0 dB, which is really, really loud in electrical terms. Now, here, what happens when you exceed the rail voltage, what happens is, of course, that signal goes up higher like that. And then what happens is that that active device or active DI box or preamplifier will clip the signal. That's right, that's what they call clipping, right there, okay? So the signal only goes so far and it starts to distort. Transformers are different. Transformers don't distort like an active circuit, they actually saturate. And what that means is that as you exceed the functioning level, instead of being a square wave, they kind of round out like that. And because they round out that way, they sound more natural. A lot of people say, wow, that DI box sounds vintage. Well, it's not so much that the DI box sound vintage, it's just that old gear always used transformers, and transformers sound a certain way. They naturally compress. And how they do that is because the signal goes into a primary side of the transformer, exits the secondary side, and the signal is actually converted into a magnetic field. So it's not an active amplifying circuit at all. There's no power required. So with the Pro D2, you don't have to power it up at all. You just plug it in and play, which makes it really cool. So as the signal goes in, it's converted into a magnetic field. There's no connection from the input to the output. As a result, you get clean sound and you're passing the signal through the transformer that warms it up. Great for all these digital whiz-bang machines that kind of sound harsh. Transformers are so cool, they sound vintage. Add to that, let's look at this drawing here that I've got. So the keyboard plugged in, and there's our transformer going to the output. Now transformers have another benefit, and it has to do with ground loops. Ground, buzz, and hum, noise is caused by what is known as a ground loop. And what that really means is that when this keyboard, which might have a 12 volt reference to ground, to this mixing console that might have a 16 volt reference to ground, there's some kind of a discrepancy that can occur between these two devices. Transformers block the DC stray voltages from moving around, so that's one of the benefits. The other benefit is that these guys are both connected to the ground system. So there's an electrical ground, and then there's an audio ground. You lift the ground by hitting that little ground lift switch, and then all of a sudden, this problem known as a ground loop that kind of does one of these has no way of actually being a loop because it's being stopped by the transformer, and there's a ground lift that lifts the ground through the cable. So you're actually solving a really important problem. And of course, when you're playing on stage and you got buzz and hum problems, there's nothing more frustrating because it doesn't sound very good. So you start to look at these benefits. So the benefits, when you think in terms of the Pro D2, mean less distortion, of course, because it handles more signal. You don't have the same kind of problem. Really important with those digital pianos and drum machines and things like that. You get rid of the ground loop problems, which means you get a good clean signal with no noise, no hum, no buzz, and it lets you perform quickly. Now, just before I leave you, let you guys go, I'm going to show you a couple things. First off, I'm going to show you how this thing is connected. You've got inputs and outputs. That's designed so that the keyboard plugs in here. There's your XLR outs. Those go to your mixer, and then these two through connectors are designed so that you can actually have a stage amplifier. So your keyboard comes in here, that sends signal to your stage amplifier, and that goes to the PA system or the recording system. If you've got a larger room and you want to run the signal without noise, that's the way to go. And of course, you get the benefit of the sound of the transformers. How do these radial transformers sound? Well, you can actually see the inside. You can see what they are. They're mu metal encased. That's to get rid of noise. They sound amazing. What can I tell you? You've got guys like Herbie Hancock, you've got Chick Corea, you've got U2, all these guys using the Pro D2 or variation to be the Pro DI or the Pro D8, which is an 8-channel rack, all use the same audio circuit. They're on tours all over the world, Lady Gaga to you name it. They're using these boxes. So you're really in good company when you get a Pro DI or a Pro D2. Pro D2 is, of course, the stereo version. I think that's about it. I think you got the overview. Plug your keyboard in, away you go, no noise, no hum, no buzz, no distortion. It works great, you'll love it.